Hello and welcome to episode 32 of the Bay to Bay podcast. I'm your host, Seb Frey, and for this episode, I'm very pleased to have as my guest Evan Siroky. Evan is the founder of the Santa Cruz YIMBYs. That's the Santa Cruz Yes in My Backyard organization, and they are advocating for the construction of more housing in Santa Cruz. Now, Santa Cruz is an area that has a terrible housing crisis. You know, adjusted for the cost of housing, Santa Cruz County has the second highest rate of poverty in the entire state of California. We have an absolute housing crisis here. Homelessness is out of control. People are spending far more than they should on housing, and it simply comes down to lack of supply. Nowhere near enough housing has been built in Santa Cruz over the last 30 years, and we really need more housing, and Evan and the YIMBYs are advocating for more housing construction. So if you think that housing prices are too high and that rents are too high and that we just plain need more places for people to live in Santa Cruz, then you'll want to sit back, relax, and listen to what Evan Siroky has to say. Hey, Evan, thanks so much for making the time to come on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I've been following your podcast, and it's kind of cool to be a guest.
All right. Yeah, we were on the radio together. It was like about a year ago or so, right? Over there at KSCO. We did that show about the housing crisis in Santa Cruz County. That's where I met you. And you're really big into helping us figure out the solution to our housing crisis. You work with the Santa Cruz NIMBYs, is that right?
No, actually.
Oh, YIMBYs.
YIMBYs.
The Santa Cruz YIMBYs. A common misperception. All right. Well, before we get into all that, before we get into all the YIMBYism, tell me a little bit about yourself. Like where did you grow up?
Yeah. So I was born in Seattle, Washington, and lived there until I was 10. Then our family moved to Wenatchee, Washington. And then I came back to Seattle for college. And eventually work took me down to Portland, Oregon. And while I was in college, I got a bachelor's of business, but I was always really in a kind of like transportation and kind of urban, just city life and stuff. And so I eventually got a master's of science in civil engineering as a way to get into sort of the transportation planning kind of field, career area. And so I got a job out of college getting into travel demand forecasting. So this is a field where we create these regional or sometimes small-scale transportation models to attempt to predict the future of how many vehicles are going to drive over this particular road, or even we can get finer detailed and look at a particular intersection or street and see how the signal timing is going to be best timed, or if there's this much traffic or this new development going in here, how that affect the traffic. And so I was working on that out of college, and then just slowly over time I just became a software developer, just inputting a lot of data for these travel forecasting models. And so it sort of just I became a software developer. And then I was working at a transit agency in Portland, Oregon, for a while. And I met my wife, who is from Cupertino, but was living up in Portland because her family had moved up there. And after that, we moved down to Santa Cruz because my wife had a really good community of friends down here and liked the weather a lot better than Portland, Oregon's weather. So, yeah.
Yeah, I lived in Portland, Oregon for about 9 months, and I also have been to Wenatchee. As a matter of fact, my friends had his family had a summer vacation cottage up there, and so when I went to work in Alaska in the salmon cannery, we stopped off at that vacation cottage for probably 3 days and swam in Lake Wenatchee. It was lots
Oh,
of fun.
nice.
Yeah, yeah, very cool. And yeah, I lived in Portland for 9 months, and it was too rainy and cold for me. I just didn't really float my boat too much. So,
Mm.
how long ago did you end up in Santa Cruz?
So we moved here in September of 2015, and yeah, so that's about a little over 3 years we've been here.
All right, okay,
Um,
cool deal. So, how
yeah, and
did
my wife had been here for. I was going to say my wife had lived in Santa Cruz for I think at least 10 years before she was in Portland. So she's got a little more longevity over here.
Right. Okay. Good deal. So, but how did you get involved with the Yimbys? I mean, the Yimbys are standing like, yes, in my backyard, and I guess there's Yimbys from coast to coast. Is there like a national organization for Yimbys, or?
We'll do a little history of this whole YIMBY. What is YIMBY? It's like, so YIMBY, as you mentioned, is an acronym meaning yes in my backyard. And so, back in probably like the 2000s, it was, the term NIMBY had been coined by I don't know who, but like it was just sort of just describing someone or a group of people who were like not in my backyard. I don't want, this transit project in my backyard. I don't want uh, a wastewater treatment plant in my backyard, or I don't want housing in my backyard. And so what happened was, I was when I moved to the Santa Cruz area, I had sort of I still hadn't really heard of the movement yet, and I knew that housing was really expensive, and I sort of just thought it was, hey, we're next to Silicon Valley, and there's all the tech over there, and they're just it's expensive because there's so much tech. And I was like, okay, well, we're moving into it, and my wife really wants to be here, and so I really was a little ambivalent about where I was living. So when I'd visited here, it was really awesome. Really good bicycling and just outdoor lifestyle, and really liked a group of friends that my wife had made. And so, yeah, it seemed all right. Just the housing was a little expensive, but eventually I was just curious about what is what the urban planning is like out here in Santa Cruz. And I was actually living up in Scotts Valley area when I was taking a look at sort of the long range plans for how much housing Scotts Valley is going to anticipate growing by in the next 20 or so years. And I looked it up, and it was something like 200 units. So like 10 units a year. And I was like, whoa, holy moly. Like, housing is this expensive, but this, like, the city and all these areas are like not planning for any growth. So like they're purposely creating a housing shortage by these plans. And I'm like, whoa. This is not good. This is actually why housing is so expensive. Like, I mean, yeah, there's tech, and so like people can afford these outrageous prices, but like the real reason like it's expensive for everyone is that we're just not building anywhere near enough. And so it was also around that time that I started to see, some other YIMBY groups, like they're actually people calling themselves YIMBYs. And so this was, I had made friends in Seattle with a transit advocate named Ben Schindemann. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but he was starting to transition from being an advocate for public transit to being an advocate for more housing. And I thought that, really made more sense. Like I was even seeing a little bit of it in Seattle of like, people were, opposing greater densities of housing, especially next to good transit that Seattle just built. And I'm like, this is not the way to do it. Like we're building these, public transit routes that can carry thousands and thousands of people, and we're not allowing the urban environment to grow in a way that can, best facilitate the movement of people. And instead, it'd be people just, driving. And, there's this whole, global warming crisis going on that is at this point, like the primary, emissions source of carbon emissions is from private transportation. And so, like, it just seemed very wrong to go that way. So anyways, I saw like the YIMBY groups forming in San Francisco and Oakland, and I was following that a little bit, and it was like, man, I gotta see if there's something like in the Santa Cruz area that is, maybe there's a Santa Cruz chapter of the YIMBY movement. So I reached out to the people in San Francisco, and they're like, yeah, we heard of one or two people saying something like that, but yeah, just you should try to find some people and start a group. And so basically I did. Yeah, and so I like started a Facebook and Twitter account, and just started meeting a whole bunch of people, like-minded people who are also like, yeah, we need to get more housing built. Like, there's not enough, and there needs to be more. And yeah, it's kind of just gained steam from there.
Right on. So when did you officially, like, I mean, is there like a charter for the Santa Cruz YIMBYs? Like when was that chapter chartered?
Well, like, yeah, I created the Facebook and Twitter account in like, I think 2016 in April. And like, it's always been like very ad hoc and not really, we even in our group, we don't have any bylaws or any real, we do have monthly meetings, but it's always like, okay, well, we're like, we almost always agree on the, we need to support this project. And so, we don't really have a whole lot of intergroup conflict yet, but yeah, it's sort of been around for about 2 years.
Very, very organic, essentially, kind of grassroots, not like some outside, pack or whatever that's come into town no. Organizing you guys to become agitators.
No,
so
not at all.
How many people are involved? Like, I mean, maybe you don't even have like a member count, but like roughly, would you say how many people are kind of involved in Santa Cruz YIMBYs?
Yeah, well, we've had, like, I just looked at we have like a email list, and we've got about, I think, 250, like around 250 people that have signed up for that. And so we send out a monthly newsletter. We keep track of certain projects and housing news. And then we also have, an internal email list that people can kind of chat with each other. And there's about 40-ish people that are on that. But I would say, about maybe 70 unique people have attended a monthly meeting over time. So, yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, right? It's not bad. It's not huge, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I find it so hard to get people involved in doing anything, right? I mean, that's my experience. Like, getting people to like take action is like almost impossible, and it really amazes me that anybody is actually successful about getting people to do that. So I'm just wondering, what kind of people are involved in Santa Cruz YIMBYs? Are these like real estate developers and like VCs, venture capitalists looking to like create like massive apartment complexes, or like who is it who actually is a YIMBY? Like, what kind of people are involved?
It's definitely not VCs, because it might be a surprising thing to people, but like, it's not always like building apartments isn't a lucrative thing in this state, and at least not to the extent that some other things are. And so, but yeah, who comes? It's just a bunch of various people. We have some our demographics are actually like a little more older. Like, we don't have a ton of young people in our group. We've got just some retired people who are also aware of the housing shortage issue that attend regularly. We do have a few local housing developers that are regular attendees, and just some other people in the kind of business world that are, also very interested in the issue, just because with businesses in Santa Cruz, it's a major problem trying to attract and then retain employees, because the housing costs and just also just plain old availability of housing. Like it's hard to even find like a decent place to live out here. So they're definitely trying to solve one of the biggest pain points for their employees.
So that's interesting to me in a couple of different ways. The first one is that older people would be involved, because I remember when we did that talk show on KSCO, people called in and they were like, "I bought a house here 50 years ago and I don't want to see it change. We don't need more housing. If they can't afford it, they should just live somewhere else." So it surprises me. Surprises me that older people are involved, but then again, I guess older people tend to have more time if you're retired. And the second thing was that yes, you have business people involved, because I'm a member of the Santa Cruz County Business Council. Robert Singleton, of course, and it seems like almost all of every meeting is talking about housing. Like that is the thing that really, I'm serious. At least half of the time they spend is dealing with how do we get more housing. Because like you say, I mean, like it's very hard for businesses to like attract and retain good employees if they can't pay a wage where they can afford to live there. And then I also am reminded of what the at the California Association of Realtors, we have this great guy named Joel Singer. He runs the organization. He's like the executive officer, and he says at some point a supply problem becomes a demand problem. Like we will like choke off our own growth, right? And basically, reduce our income by failing to make affordable housing. So that those two things that you said were really interesting to me. So, I've seen you on Twitter and I've seen you on Facebook, and you do a great job, and you put some interesting stuff out there on Twitter and on Facebook. But all this like must take a tremendous amount of your time, I imagine, or at least a pretty good chunk of it. So why is housing so important to you? Like you're not getting paid for this, right? So why is it so important to you that you spend so much of your time on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like an addiction, like for me at some point, like, but like I just, it's made me like just sad and angry, like just how difficult and how expensive housing is, and just hearing the stories and of people like, since we've came here, like a lot of not a lot, but like, a fair amount of the community that we came here to be near, they've moved away for, I don't know, various opportunities, but definitely the housing cost is certainly a driver of that. And so but yeah, like that's kind of what motivates me. And it's just, I see like, I just like put on like different glasses and see things through a different lens whenever I go around, Santa Cruz County and just most of California. I just see like I go through Capitola and I'm like, why is everything just 2 stories tall over here? And I'm like, oh yeah, zoning. Like they like have purposely kept things like small and like not allowed as much housing as is needed out here. And so yeah, it just seems like I feel like I'm almost like tasked with driving this cause over here in Santa Cruz County, and just being involved with this movement, and just like it just feels I just sort of feel like I almost have like a calling to do this, to be a little agitator on this front of getting housing built. And so
right I hear ya. So do you think Santa Cruz is like more YIMBY than most places? Because it feels to me like we're like 10 times more YIMBY than most places. But then the Bay Area, I think, is incredibly YIMBY as well. I mean, you're not from here. What do you feel? Does it feel?
Are you talking YIMBY or NIMBY?
Oh, NIMBY, right. It's more NIMBY. Sorry, definitely not more YIMBY. You think Santa Cruz is more NIMBY? Like, I mean, are we like more anti-development than most places, or anywhere, or everywhere, or what do you think?
Well, yeah, I do think it is more like anti-development than other areas. to a certain extent, like I feel like, this is, a really beautiful natural environment area where that kind of thing can easily, you know, be, people have reasons that are totally justifiable, I think. I think one of the catalysts that happened for a lot of this was, way back in the late 70s and 80s when there was a lot of development, probably an order of magnitude or two more than what is happening today. And so I read a book and been trying to learn a little more about this history of Santa Cruz. But one of the catalysts was Wilder Ranch State Park was going to be a massive housing project, and it was going to be something like at least 10,000 homes. And so that was, right around when the environmental movement was happening, and that whole thing was stopped. And so, I don't want to see Wilder Ranch paved over like that. And so, to a certain extent, I've got, a little bit of NIMBYism. I don't want to see, our forests turned into just sprawl or something like that. But I think it's the pendulum just swung way too far over time. And so now, even things like 3-story buildings are, people are going, turning into NIMBYs against. And so, I think, this area definitely is, very anti-development, but to the extent that it is, it's just a little too much, I think.
Right. Well, I mean, I certainly don't want to see a Wilder Ranch or any green area really converted to low density housing, which is what they were talking about. Basically, I don't want to see acres and acres of single family homes built. I certainly wouldn't want to see that. I mean, that's certainly, I don't think, an appropriate answer. So you think that basically, I mean, because it's true. I mean, Santa Cruz there's a lot of development going on in the 70s, a lot. Not that much in the 80s, I guess, because by the 80s they'd already passed Measure J, right? That came out in 78 or whatnot. So what do you think the legacy of Measure J is? Because Measure J, people think of it as the affordable housing initiative, but really it was a slow growth initiative. What part does that play in where we are at today with housing in Santa Cruz County?
Well, yeah, I actually haven't done a ton of research into Measure J or Measure O, and I feel like those things are sort of the the affordable housing requirements of requiring at least 15% of homes to be affordable that are built in the future. And I think that to a certain extent that has stopped a certain amount of growth, but I feel like there's more to it than just that. I don't know if this was part of Measure J or what, but a lot of people have been here a long time telling me that the bigger part of Measure J was sort of this idea that we would stop building stuff in places like Wilder Ranch. We would have this green belt of areas surrounding our already urban areas, and so development was just off limits out there, but was going to be on limits or whatever, we were going to allow denser building within our urban areas. But that second part of the deal obviously never happened. And so I think, the biggest impediments I see towards housing are, these zoning codes that don't allow denser and taller buildings, but also sort of the permitting and streamlining and or not streamline, the building codes of the county and the city are also just really not allowing certain types of buildings to get built. And so I think that's sort of my take on Measure J now as a newcomer.
Right. Okay. So, I see that nowadays there's been a lot of housing projects, especially for the city of Santa Cruz. You don't see so much outside the city,
Mhm.
but, well, you do in
Right.
Watsonville, I guess. So, Watsonville and Santa Cruz, and to a lesser extent, Scotts Valley, there are housing projects that are being proposed, and even some big ones in Santa Cruz. So,
Yeah.
what projects that are coming down the pike that you've heard about that like seem especially cool or interesting or exciting to you?
Yeah. Well, the biggest one, of course, is the UCSC's Student Housing West project. So this is going to be a project to create 3,000 beds, a net gain of 2,200. And so it's going to create three or four about 8 or 9 story buildings near the west entrance to the campus. And I think those are going to be mainly for housing grad students, if I'm not mistaken. But that's definitely the biggest one, and we're following that one pretty closely just because there's such a huge need for student housing in this town. And so that's the biggest. The other ones we've been tracking. There's the project at Pacific, Front, and Laurel, kind of where the Taco Bell is at the corner of Pacific and Laurel. So that entire block is going to become a 6-story apartment building with retail restaurants on the ground floor. And also a component of that is the developer donated part of the land to the city with the intent being that the city is going to contract with an affordable housing developer to build 100 additional income restricted housing units there as well. But there's even some other things. That Laurel Street project was just approved on Tuesday. The Student Housing West still needs approval, but there's 2 other ones that I'll give a shout out. There's a project that we just saw. It's called 908 Ocean, and this is proposed to be a 4 to 3 story building, and taking up most of the city block that is at the corner of water and ocean. And it's taking advantage of a new city ordinance that says that you can build as many single ownership units as you can fit into a project. And so there's going to be potentially 333 of these units going in there. And then finally, there's the Scotts Valley Town Center, which could also be somewhere in the 200 to 300 range of housing units.
And that's going to be for senior housing up there in Scotts Valley. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
There's actually there's a number of projects in Scotts Valley. I don't think that one is going to be senior housing, but there is one that is part senior housing, part hotel, part regular housing. That's also going through the process.
All right. That's where the other one that you're talking about is where the Kmart is right now, as you're sort of heading to Felton. I forget the name of it as well. So
yeah,
that's the. Go on.
It's in the area. It's actually the Scotts Valley Town Center is in the open space that's between Sky Park and Mount Herman Road, Mount Herman Drive. So it's between like the transit center and Kmart.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So I heard that the one by the Taco Bell has been approved, and that the one on Ocean Street has not yet been approved. But I also hear that like the new city council, when they're sworn in, are going to try and unapprove it. Have you heard anything about that?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. What happened was on Tuesday. This was the very last council meeting before the new city council was sworn in later that evening for the city of Santa Cruz. And so, there's these arguments that we haven't had enough democratic process or meetings in the 5 years leading up to approval of the project, that maybe we should wait another month to have even more democratic process, and also a city council that's aligning more with, the progressive politics of Santa Cruz. And so, yeah, I don't think a unapproval of the project is going to happen, but we'll definitely be watching out for it. I mean, it's approved right now, so they would have to, go through more public meetings, and I mean, it would. I think it would take quite a bit of effort to unapprove that. I think what actually might happen is there might be some kind of lawsuit or something that, I don't know. We'll see.
Right, like a CEQA lawsuit, good old fashioned CEQA lawsuit.
I don't know. Who knows?
Who knows?
I'm not going to even give out any ideas,
Right, don't want to give any ideas. But I heard that that this project on Ocean Street, which seems to me like the exact kind of housing that we most critically need, right, which is small, affordable units. I heard there's quite a bit of opposition building to that already, and it's just been proposed. I mean, like, why would the people opposing, like, the kind of housing that we definitely need? It's energy efficient, it's water efficient, it's for small housing units, it's right on a major road, in fact, perhaps the most major road in town, and yet people are already, like, gearing up to fight this, which is kind of like dream project. Why are people, do you think, would be opposed to something like this?
Well, ultimately, you have to ask those people. But I think just the general sentiment, I'm of course biased when I say this, but I just think they want their town to stay the same. They think it's okay right now, and adding more people, they believe it'll cause a unbearable amount of traffic, and just they're not in support of much change, nowhere near the amount that we hope is going to happen. So, yeah.
Right. People just don't like change, which is, I mean, to me, it's like tremendously ironic because like 100 years ago, almost none of this was here. I mean, like 90% of everything around here was not here 100 years ago, right? So like change has been happening this whole time, right? I mean, like trying to stop change is like trying to like stop a train by standing in front of it. I mean, like, it's just, you're not going to get too far with that, right? I mean, like, we really need to just direct and manage the kind of change, and anything which fights sprawl, right, and inefficient resource utilization is, to me, a pretty smart thing to be doing.
Well, I mean, going back to like that Wilder Ranch, like there has been, change that's been stopped. Like I went to one of these YIMBY meetings, and I heard a former county supervisor, Gary Patton, say that, before he was, elected to county supervisor, the plan for Santa Cruz was for the population to grow to 500,000 people. And today it's still just around, it's not even 300. It's, I don't know, someone like 260 or something like that. So, I'll throw it back at you. Like there has been, significant changes to proposed changes that have occurred. So, it has been possible, but I just think there's so much pressure, and just, we can't have zero change. We can, but we need to have, a little more than what's going on right now, for sure.
Right. Well, a lot more. I mean, like it's a social justice issue, really, right? I mean, because we're essentially creating a society here in Santa Cruz County of haves versus have-nots, right? And like the haves, people who already have, they don't want to see any change, and the have-nots obviously do. And the future can't look like the past. It really can't. I mean, no. It's just, I mean, the whole Bay Area, I think, just has this suburban mindset that it can't escape. I mean, I look at like the classic example of Apple's new spaceship campus, right? This 21st century building, right? 15,000 people working there, and right across the street, you have tract houses built in the 1950s, like 1,400 square foot tract houses on 6,500 square foot lots, like literally across the street. I mean, like if this were Hong Kong, those would be like, 40-story, apartment buildings, right?
Totally.
Condo complexes, right? And that makes sense. People could just
Oh
shoot
yeah.
down the elevator and go to work via, like under a bridge, that takes you across Homestead or under Homestead, right? And into your
Right.
wonderful, transit center, which is right there in front of Apple, right? I mean, like that
Yeah.
would be smart, right?
Oh
But
yeah.
people in Sunnyvale, which is where those houses are, they don't want to see that, right? I can get it. I mean, like if you have like a ranch house, you don't want to see like a 40-story apartment tower built right next to you, right? But it wouldn't happen overnight. It's just we need to like start planning for a future where people can live. And the thing that kind of like gets me is that, I mean, you've probably been to Manhattan before, I would imagine. Have you been to Manhattan?
For just a few seconds. So I was taking a train through there, and we ran up to the ground level while the train was stopped, and took a picture and ran back down. That's that's the extent of me being in Manhattan.
Well, if you go to Manhattan or like, like any city that has a lot of density, right? I mean, like there's all kinds of awesome places, right? I mean, like a lot of these cities
Yeah.
are highly livable and enjoyable
Yeah.
and fun. And it's not like, it's not a pastoral scene with like cows dotting the hills in Manhattan. Of
Right.
course not,
Right.
because it's not that kind of a place, but it probably was like 400 years ago, but
Mm,
gradually, I mean, like things change, right? And so to
yeah.
me, the idea that high density means bad, to me it's like it's not, it's a non sequitur, right? High density does not mean bad. High density could mean fun, interesting, exciting, right? With like great food, shopping, entertainment options, right? I mean,
Oh,
that's what
totally.
it that's what it means to me. So
Yeah.
but I'll get off my soapbox and let me ask you
I'm with
about
you.
this whole Measure M thing, right? So like over at we in the real estate community are very happy that Measure M was defeated so soundly by like a 30% margin, right? I mean, like it was a resounding no to rent control. Where do the YIMBYs come in on things like Measure M and rent control? I mean, do you guys think that's helpful or harmful for the goal of creating more affordable
Mm-hmm.
housing?
Well, I think the biggest thing for us was we were opposed to Measure M as a group, and there was just a really huge threat towards getting more housing built, with the possibility of Prop 10 also passing at the same time as Measure M passing. And so there was language in the text of the proposed Measure M that said that the rent board shall pursue rent control on all building types to the furthest extent permitted by state law. And so I'm sort of paraphrasing, but that's sort of what it was saying. And so we interpreted that as if Measure M and Prop 10 passed, then the rent board would place rent control on new construction. And so that'd be just a complete deal breaker for getting literally anything built in Santa Cruz. And so we had to be against it for that. And so I'll say, like, we have a number of differing opinions within our group on rent control, but I would say, rent control doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing for getting new housing built. And I think done the right way, it could actually help with incentivizing new housing to get built. Because if I think people aren't able to make as much money on older housing, they'll be incentivized to build newer housing and thus more housing. And so, our group is like really focused on the overall, supply and imbalance with what demand there is. And so we're just trying to find ways to, increase the supply so that it can fulfill more demand.
Right. Well, that's great. I mean, like, I love the fact that you're not too orthodox about any particular thing, right? I mean, like, that's very pragmatic, right? Like, whatever gets us to, an increased supply is something that you're in favor of, essentially, potentially.
Yeah. Like, there's always limits to what we will support and not support. And, so far we haven't seen anything that we wouldn't support. But, there have been a number of, things, like even with like rent control, like you may be incentivized to like tear down a building and build market rate, if that is, permitted by the law. And, if you're going to do that and get a net loss of housing, then that's, a danger of having things written that way.
Right, totally. So, one thing that people are, we touched on this, I guess, that people are afraid of change and all this, people don't want to see the town change. But, what do you think it would look like in Santa Cruz County if we were to have, like thousands, let's just say, because there's a lot of stuff on the books right now, right? And so maybe it will result in, 3,000, 4,000 more small units built in the city of Santa Cruz. How do you think that would affect our city? Would we have like a lot more like, I don't know, traffic, smog, pollution, crime? What do you see like, in 5 years from now with 5,000 more housing units in town? What changes do you expect to see?
Well, yeah, I feel like 5,000 is a good start. Like we need more than that. Like we're like all of California is like 3.5 million housing units short of where we should be according to some study. And so I think that'd be a good start for the town. But I think ultimately like just having more options and more places for people to live will free up more availability and will drive down prices a little bit, but also just create a more vibrant community of like more people around, and just there'll be more businesses popping up to support this additional demand. And I do think traffic will increase a little bit, but I'm hopeful that with the advent of a lot of new electric vehicles, like especially electric bikes and electric scooters, and maybe some expanded transit, that it'll be bearable. But right now, like a lot of people are like commuting long distances to get to where they need to work. And so if we are creating enough housing near the places that people do work, then traffic will actually decrease for that part of the equation. And so like people like maybe walk to work, or take an electric bike, or just transit will actually make sense now, instead of it being like an hour and a half transit ride from Watsonville. Maybe it's just a 20-minute ride from nearby in town. And so I think I really hope Santa Cruz will grow a little more and become a little more dense, and I think it'll be an overall good thing.
Right, will actually become possibly a more livable city, right? Like where
Right.
you could walk. Like one thing cool about this, what's it called? The one where they're replacing the Taco Bell, Pacific Front. What are they calling it? Pacific Front.
Yeah.
That's also, by the way, right next to the transit center, right?
Exactly.
Where you get a bus to UC Santa Cruz, right? Which is where most people, where thousands and thousands of people go every day, right? It just makes really great sense, right? And then, of course, you mentioned the other transportation options, which I just want to ask you, since you said you were into transportation planning, what do you think of our whole rail corridor? What do you, how do you see that playing into like better transportation and housing? Do you think that we need a big train, or do you think that would be better for like a pedestrian scooter path?
Oh yeah, well this is a really interesting and topic for me, because we have people from both sides of that camp in our YIMBY group, and so I see the merits of both arguments, really. Like that it could be it's a train corridor right now, and it goes where a lot of people are, and so making rail along that could definitely be great. But I come from Seattle, where I'm a little apprehensive about commuter rail because of the sheer cost of it. But it's a little different in Seattle, because they have to pay a huge amount to the railway company to rent the railway line for their trains. So it's definitely much more cost effective to run commuter rail. But then I also think we could just run more buses, and not spend as much capital. And then once the buses are, actually at capacity and there's literally no more possibility to put more people on a bus route, then we got to upgrade to rail. So I think that corridor should be some kind of thoroughfare for people to travel along. And so I could see it being commuter rail or a multi-use trail. So I think either of those would be a good option.
Either one would be better than what we have right now, which is a defunct transportation corridor running through some of the densest parts of the county.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, very good. Okay, so listen, I'm sure that a lot of people probably have never heard of the YIMBYs, and I'm sure that probably a lot of people would be interested in participating. So how do people get involved? And are there any certain kinds of people that you need to get involved? Like, do you need people to help you build websites or hand out leaflets or sign petitions or what kind of people do you want to have involved with you guys?
Yeah, anyone really that is interested in getting more housing built around here. There's areas that we could use help in really anything, just step on up. But we got a website, santacruzyimby.org. And we're on Facebook and Twitter at Santa Cruz YIMBY. And we can use help, handing out flyers at meetings or getting people to show up and support projects, and also just track all the kind of process that goes into getting housing built, because there's so many layers. And then even after people get their projects approved, that doesn't mean they get built. They still need to go through financing and construction and permits. And I've actually heard of a number of people that they haven't gotten started, even though we advocated for their approval, and their project is at risk or has stopped altogether, either due to financing falling through or something like one of our project we supported, they got hit with a CEQA lawsuit. So we could definitely use some help to just track all these aspects.
All right, and that's actually pretty important. You need people to show up at these meetings, right? At these planning commission meetings and at the city council meetings or county supervisor meetings, and voice support, because so much of what we hear at these meetings is the no crowd comes out, but the silent majority yes crowd. I don't know if they're the majority or not, but the yes crowd oftentimes does not show up for whatever reason. So listen, in closing here, because we got to wrap it up. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you needed to get out there? Any messages that you want to share with people?
Well, no, I think we touched quite a bit of it, and I really liked how we were talking about planning for the future, and that's sort of the one question I really want to ask people who are still not convinced that we need more housing. And I'm it's I like to ask them where are people going to live in the future? Say there's a project that you don't want to see in your backyard, and okay, maybe you want to see 2 stories but not 3. Where are all the people that would have been on the 3rd story? Where are they going to live? Where are people going to live in the future? And so I just really hope people be thinking about our future. And I have a 1-year-old daughter, and I have a lot of other families that we're friends with, and I really want us to be thinking about not just ourselves, but where is everyone going to be able to live in the future, and is it going to be affordable for them? And so just something to hope other people start thinking about a little more.
All right, very good. Okay, so santacruzyimby.org is where they can find you, and also at Santa Cruz YIMBY on Twitter and on Facebook. They just Santa Cruz YIMBY. And you guys have any other social media? Do you have Instagram account? No, that's it. Those are the important ones.
Yeah, and you can also sign up for our email newsletter. You can follow the links on our website.
Okay. All right. So go to santacruzyimby.org, and hopefully some people will hear this and join you. And I'll sign up for your email list. I'm not sure that I am, but I already have mobile notifications set for your Twitter feed. So anytime you tweet, it pops up on my phone. So you You're doing great work, and I really appreciate that. Over at the Santa Cruz County Association of Realtors, we just modified our mission statement, and we put our mission statement in there. We also want to provide housing, right? Which is, we've always been for like private property rights and home ownership, right? But now we've actually added the housing component into our mission statement, because we really want to see more housing of all kinds built. We recognize that there's a crisis, and that the way we built housing in the past, is not going to work for the kind of housing that we need in the future. So, hey, thank you so much for getting involved, right? And like moving the needle. And I mean, it's pushing a big rock up a hill. I know it's really hard work.
Oh, yes.
So thank you for that. I really, truly appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, and thanks for taking the time to be in my podcast. I know you got a lot going on, so I'll let you get back to your family, and I'll talk to you again someplace real soon, I hope. All right, that wraps up episode number 32 of the Beta Bay podcast. I hope you've enjoyed listening to my conversation with Evan, and I really love that he is somebody who is actually like doing something about it. He's not just sitting around bemoaning the high cost of housing or how nothing gets done. He's actually going out there and making something happen, and he's volunteering, and all the people in the YIMBYs are volunteering as well. So, please help these folks out, right? Show up to these meetings and be a voice for more housing, because that is what we so desperately need in Santa Cruz. All right, and before I wrap it up, I must also give a shout out to our sponsor of this week's episode, and that would be SavvySellerSeminar.com. That's right. Go to SavvySellerSeminar.com to sign up for my free seminar that I'm putting on this coming Thursday, January 24th, 2019, in beautiful Aptos, California, at the Best Western Seacliff Inn. It's going to be fun. I'm going to try and make it, like a good time. We're going to have, some appetizers and some drinks and some door prizes, and I'm going to try and have it be a fun event and very informative. So I would love it if you guys could come and meet me. It would be great to meet some of you in person. And hey, you know what? Invite a friend, or better yet, bring a friend. So if you want to show up to the seminar, please register ahead of time by going to SavvySellerSeminar.com. All right, that's it for this episode. Thanks again so much for listening. I really appreciate it, and I'll have another episode for you guys out before too much longer.